Hi there and welcome to my presentation. I'll be analysing the facial hair trends of a pre-20th century culture in order to design and create a postiche piece suitable for a specific media setting. My culture of choice is the ancient Romans. An ever-changing culture which spanned well over a millennium, ancient Rome is as vast as its empire was powerful. Gaining even a basic understanding of any facet of this civilization is no small undertaking. The attitude of this culture towards facial hair is one that naturally develops through its long history, due to many internal and external factors that will be discussed as I weave my way through the numerous trends seen within. The best place to begin, I believe, is the beginning. Through the earliest eras of Rome, the period of kings well into the Republic, Romans allowed their hair and beards to grow long without cropping, as was often the case with more primitive peoples. Now, it's widely believed that there were no barbers in Rome until around 300 BC, proven by the statues up to this point all having lengthy hair and full beards. Classicists agree that barbers were introduced to Rome by the Greeks, specifically the Greeks who inhabited Sicily at the time, and this introduction was one of many factors contributing to the somewhat ambiguous notion of cultus in Roman life, which in this sense is the importance given to the management of one's personal appearance as a way to honour the gods. Barbers played an important role in this, using numerous tools and products to shave and style the hair, as well as provide an overall grooming service not dissimilar to what is seen in many barbers today. As fashions developed, more and more Roman men started going clean-shaven, with General Scipio the Younger being the first Roman to take up the practice of daily shaving, setting this as the fashion among the elite for centuries to come. Evidence for this comes from the numerous busts of important men from the time who were almost all depicted as clean-shaven. However, this does make it difficult to determine what the ordinary layperson may have looked like, as it was not particularly common for anyone but the most respected to be honoured in statues and coins. This shift towards being clean-shaven can be explained by the growing importance of cultus, as hair itself and the treatment of it acquired numerous symbolic meanings. Shown by the increase of barbers in Rome at the time, shaving was seen as a mark of civilization, whereas having an unkempt beard was seen as slovenly. As Jerry Toner, in his 2015 article Barbers, Barbershops and Searching for Roman Popular Culture, explains, despite there being no etymological link between the Latin words for beard, barba, and barbarian, barbarus, the terms acquired shared connotations of rough, rustic unkemptness, which is a notion shared among classicists, adding that a long beard could be a sign of mourning or illness. And there are numerous examples of Roman rulers who refused to shave or cut their hair following a military defeat. Notably Julius Caesar, who, after the defeat of his armies in Gaul in 54 BC, took an oath not to shave until the massacre had been avenged. Now, looking at the symbolism of facial hair in Rome, it's clear it played an important part in a young man's life. The practice of depositio barbae, or first shaving, was a significant rite of passage and marked the transition from boy to man, with the removal of the boy's youthful facial hair essentially displaying to those around him that he was no longer a boy, but a bona fide man. And this usually happened in the man's early 20s and would be a cause of celebration amongst the community, with boys often using oil to promote their beard growth. This practice holding religious significance as well, the ritual was no small affair. Upon his first shave, Emperor Augustus held a festival for all of his citizens, and Nero put his hair in a gold box adorned with pearls, in dedication to the god Jupiter. The practice of dedicating a boy's first beard to the gods was something seen many centuries earlier in Greece, occurring in a religious ritual to the sun god Apollo. It's been noted that this practice wasn't seen in Rome before the imperial era, and with Rome's invasion of Greece in 146 BC, it's not hard to infer that immigration within the empire led to widespread cultural borrowing and the dissemination of ideas between the cultures. This is particularly prevalent with regards to their religions, as both were polytheistic belief structures holding many similarities, with each Roman god sharing the same basic characteristics as its Greek counterpart. As such, it's not hard to see the origins and importance of this first shaving ritual and its religious significance thereof. As we move into the later Republic and early Empire, the practice of shaving had become so widespread, thanks to the introduction of barbers and cultus, that having a beard was considered wholly un-Roman. This is evident in official portraiture of the time and was largely seen as a reaction to the Greek beards of old, as having any connection to the Greeks at this point could be politically suspicious. A potential origin of the beard becoming so un-Roman dates back to the introduction of Greek philosophy with the embassy of the three philosophers to Rome in 155 BC. The three Greek men noticeably stood out among the near universally clean-shaved Romans, solidifying the idea in the Romans' minds that these people were not of Rome. And this also relates back to the notion of beards being barbaric in nature, in line with cultus. However, during the empire, the beard had become the overriding symbol of a philosopher's integrity within Rome, and this being politically difficult is shown by the paranoid Emperor Domitian, who ordered all philosophers to be banished from Rome, resulting in many of the learned group shaving their beards in order to hide their profession, much to the chagrin of Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who, when asked to shave, responded with, "If I am a philosopher, I will not shave myself." Now, I'd like to look a little more closely at the philosopher's beard. The practice of philosophers wearing beards was, much like the practice of philosophy itself, a wholly Greek idea. Following 3rd century BC clean-shaven trendsetter Alexander the Great, however, having a beard was seen as conservative or old-fashioned, with only the philosophers clinging to their beards for their supposed symbolism. They believed it a law of nature that hair grows on a man's face, and removing this was a denial of the natural order of things. Additionally, they believed shaving made a man look soft and effeminate, raising suspicions of sexual depravity and a lust for luxuries. Heaven forbid. Much like in Rome a few centuries later, the beard became a symbol of the otherness of philosophers, separated from regular society for their conservative beliefs and identifiable by their facial hair. By the 3rd century BC, it was possible to identify which school a philosopher belonged to simply from the way he wore his hair and beard, with varying styles and levels of kemptness distinguishing the way a philosopher thought. However, at the same time, this became an object of ridicule among wider society, giving rise to the phrase "barba non facit philosophum," or "a long beard does not a philosopher make." The original phrase, of course, being in ancient Greek, with the Latin translation giving further evidence that this perception transferred into Roman culture as well. Now, looking at philosophers in Rome specifically, by the time of the Roman Empire, the beard had become the symbol of a philosopher's rectitude. An example of this comes from when Emperor Marcus Aurelius had set up 4 chairs of philosophy in Athens in 176 AD, with each chair to be headed by a representative from each of the major schools. During the selection process, one candidate was rejected purely on the grounds that he did not possess a beard, to which the candidate suggested that if they were to be judged by their facial hair, the chair should be given to a goat. This matter was considered so gravely important that it had to be escalated to the highest authority in Rome, the emperor himself, showing that by this time the philosopher's beard was so ingrained in Roman culture, it was seen as an absolute necessity if one wanted to be respected within their field. An interesting evolution from the somewhat ridiculed notion of the philosopher's beard a few centuries earlier in Greece. Going back to the Romans as a whole, the practice of being clean-shaven continued well into the Roman Empire, though there was a noticeable shift in the 2nd century AD with the Emperor Hadrian sporting a full and meticulously styled beard, setting this as the prevailing fashion until the time of Emperor Constantine in the 4th century AD. Evidence for this comes from the many busts and coins disseminated in this era, displaying fully bearded and well-kempt emperors. The reasoning behind Hadrian's beard is something much discussed among classicists, with many referring to the ancient Historia Augusta, which states that Hadrian grew his beard to hide facial blemishes, and whilst it's not outrageous to see this as a reason to compel Hadrian to grow his beard, it does little to explain why this became such a widespread phenomenon throughout the empire. As Paul Zonka states in his book The Mask of Socrates, by wearing a beard as emperor, he consciously or unconsciously made this a message, perhaps arguably an ancient example of the trickle-down effect, his superior status admired by those below him who sought to emulate him in whatever manner they were able, slowly making its way through the rungs of society until bearded Romans were once again the norm. Another potential reason for Hadrian's beard was his affinity for the ancient Greeks in their culture who, as previously discussed, were known for their beards. This is a fair argument as he was a known collector of beautiful Grecian artifacts. He surrounded himself with Greek intellectuals and had a male lover, something seen as unmistakably Greek at the time. It was clear Hadrian loved his Grecian predecessors and wanted to emulate them, not only through his interests and actions, but physically through his hair, the clothes he wore, and of course his beard. This shows an interesting dichotomy between earlier Roman attitudes towards the Greeks, where previously they had done all they could to avoid the connection. Hadrian had brought in an era of rampant Hellenism, which is understandable as by this time in the empire, Greece had been a part of Rome for nearly 300 years. As such, any political mistrust was negligible as they were all essentially seen as the same people, and it's certainly human nature to view the past with rose-tinted glasses. Now, it has been argued that Hadrian's interest in Greek philosophy specifically is what prompted his beard growth. The aforementioned connection between beards and philosophers was still going strong. Thus was the widespread popularity of their fashions and teachings amongst the wider community, with further evidence coming from the fact that beards continued to get longer throughout the 2nd century AD, showing further affinity for the learned Greeks. This point has been criticised, however, as whilst it's accepted that philosophers wore beards, there is nothing to suggest that longer beards were more philosophical than others, and that at this point having a beard didn't necessarily indicate one's interest in philosophy. In addition, it seems Hadrian himself wasn't particularly interested in philosophy, rather in the Greeks and their culture in a far broader sense, shown by the fact that he is never depicted wearing a philosopher's himation, nor did he have a philosopher's hairstyle, and it's been suggested that his beard had as much to do with militarism as it did philosophy. Whatever the case, it's true that Hadrian's beard began a trend which lasted up until the dissolution of the Western Empire in the 4th century AD. Now, the important point in all this being the shift in Roman attitudes towards facial hair. Arguably, their facial hair trends could be interpreted as somewhat allegorical of their tenuous relationship with the Greeks. As the Greek civilization rose and faded away, their influence on Rome never dwindled. As Roman perception of the Greeks developed from hostility to Hadrian's mawkish Hellenism, their beards developed right alongside. Thus concludes my brief analysis of the ancient Romans and their facial hair. It was this investigative research which helped me to accurately design and create a postiche piece for my media setting of choice, which is itself another Greek invention much loved by Romans and modern audiences alike, the theatre. In order to ensure the piece is suitable for a theatre performance, there are a number of elements to consider. The foremost being the durability of the piece, as within theatre productions it's not uncommon to have 8 shows a week. As such, the piece needs to be able to withstand multiple applications, removals and cleanings. The choice of lace on which the piece is built is perhaps the most important here, as it needs to be fine enough so as not to be seen by audiences and maintain realism, whilst durable enough for the aforementioned reasons. I decided to use 40 denier lace as this provides a strong base that can be removed and applied multiple times, while not needing as delicate a hand as the much finer 30 or 20 denier lace. Another consideration is the production's budget, as finer lace tends to be more expensive, as well as less durable. It makes more sense to opt for 40 denier as this would minimise the need for the same piece to be made multiple times, another reason why a stronger lace is better in this instance, as being able to reuse the piece will naturally be a more cost-effective option. 40 denier lace allows for a good degree of realism whilst offering the durability required to ensure multiple uses and to keep costs to a minimum. Along a similar vein, the choice of hair used for the final piece is an important consideration as well. In this case, yak hair was used. The benefits of yak hair include its slightly coarse texture, as this is representative of the naturally thicker beard hair found on humans, as well as its ability to be styled. Yak is a cheaper product to use than human hair, is considered more sustainable as the animals are not harmed during harvesting, and therefore comes with fewer ethical concerns than human hair, all of which are beneficial to a theatre production with budget constraints. In the case of my piece, I chose a mixture of 3 colours with a ratio of 50% dark brown, 30% grey and 20% light brown, reminiscent of the colours that were likely seen throughout the Roman Empire. Now, so far I've been referring to my design simply as one piece. However, as can be seen on my design plan here, it is in actual fact 2 pieces, as I have chosen to create both a beard and a moustache, which need to be constructed and applied separately to ensure the actor has full movement of their face and jaw while performing. Also on the design plan is a detailed diagram of the knotting direction of the hair. This is important as it represents the beard growth patterns seen on a real face, which promotes the realism of the piece. The arrows indicate which bar of lace the hair needs to be knotted to and what direction this should be laid. I have chosen to use directional and vertical knotting in different areas of the face, including areas of sparsity around the cheeks and sections with no hair at all, as seen under the lips. Further indicated on this design plan is the knotting type and pattern. I've chosen to use single knotting as double knotting results in the knot being much larger and therefore visible to the audience. The knotting density varies between sections of the piece. Hairs under the chin and jawline are knotted closer together with 2 strands of hair to add slightly more bulk than would be seen in a natural beard. This is again due to the piece being designed for theatre, as a slightly higher density of hair allows the piece to be visible throughout the theatre, whereas the cheeks, chin and moustache are knotted with individual hairs at a slightly lower density for a more natural finish on the areas that are more easily visible to the audience. As we explored earlier, the Romans and their facial hair trends changed multiple times throughout their history, but the area that stood out for me in particular was that of the philosophers and the way different beard styles indicated which school of philosophy they belonged to. It was the peripatetic school that I have chosen to base my postiche on, as they were known to take great care of their beards. Given what we already know of Roman barbers' use of tools such as curling irons and products such as beard oil, I wanted to create a slightly more cared for, albeit still philosophical beard for my final piece, as you are seeing on screen now. In order to create this final look, I began by club cutting the hair to achieve the desired length that can be seen here, before taking the hair in sections to create a uniform layer, using point cutting to add texture to the overall style. To dress the piece, I used heated Marcel tongs at the root to create the natural root lift seen with facial hair. This is important as after knotting, the hairs tend to lay very flat against the lace, and this root lift is needed for the realistic finish. Finally, as the Romans did themselves, I used a little beard oil to add some moisture and prevent the hair looking too dry, before finishing with some Kryolan moustache wax to ensure the shape holds, as well as a light application of hairspray to guarantee the piece's longevity for a theatre performance. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I hope you found it interesting and informative, but most of all, thank you for watching.